Welcome to the Red Story, and just subscribe so I understand that everything is not in vain. Make some tea or coffee and listen to our new story and subscribe. My possessive girlfriend has sex with her coworker to make me feel jealous. I end my 3-year relationship with her as punishment. I, 28M, am at a crossroads in my relationship, and I could really use some outside perspective. I've been living with my girlfriend Lucy, 28F, for the past 2 years. And now I'm facing a tough decision about whether to marry her or not. To explain my dilemma, I need to start from the beginning. Lucy and I have a long history that goes back to our school days. We were classmates throughout high school. But back then, we couldn't stand each other. Our relationship was marked by constant arguments and competition. We'd bicker about everything, from group projects to who got to use the last piece of chalk in class. I thought she was bossy and overbearing, while she probably saw me as a lazy troublemaker. I vividly remember this incident in 10th grade, when we were paired up for a science fair project. It was supposed to be a simple assignment, but with us, nothing was ever simple. I wanted to do something on renewable energy, solar panels, wind turbines, that kind of thing. But Lucy was dead set on a project about genetics. We argued for days, neither of us willing to budge. Our bickering got so intense that our poor teacher, Mr. Thompson, had to step in. He ended up separating us and assigning us to different partners. I got paired with Mike, a quiet kid who was happy to go along with my renewable energy idea, while Lucy ended up working with Sarah, the class brainiac. That project pretty much summed up our relationship throughout most of high school. We were like oil and water, constantly butting heads. In class debates, we'd always end up on opposite sides, turning even the most mundane topics into heated arguments. During group activities, our classmates learned to keep us apart to avoid World War IA breaking out. But something changed during our senior year. Maybe it was the stress of college applications or the realization that we'd soon be going our separate ways. But we started to see each other differently. I began to notice things about Lucy that I'd overlooked before, like how dedicated she was to her studies, often staying late after school to help tutor younger students, or how fiercely she stood up for her friends when anyone tried to bully them. There was this one time when our school newspaper published an article criticizing the student council, of which Lucy was a member. Instead of getting defensive, she organized a forum where students could voice their concerns directly to the council. I remember being impressed by how she handled the situation with maturity and openness. Lucy's sharp wit, which I had once found irritating, began to amuse me. I found myself looking forward to our verbal sparring matches, enjoying the challenge of keeping up with her quick mind, and I couldn't help but admire her determination and drive. When Lucy set her mind to something, there was no stopping her. The turning point came during our school's winter formal in senior year. I almost didn't go. Dances weren't really my thing, but my best friend dragged me along, insisting I couldn't miss our last winter formal. I remember standing by the punch bowl, feeling awkward and out of place when Lucy walked in. She was wearing a stunning blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes, and her usually unruly curls were styled into elegant waves. For the first time, I saw her as more than just my annoying classmate. She was beautiful and confident, and suddenly, I couldn't take my eyes off her. To my surprise, Lucy made her way over to me. We started talking, first about trivial things like the tacky decorations and the terrible DJ. But soon we were deep in conversation about our hopes for college and our fears about the future. We ended up talking for hours that night, discovering we had more in common than we ever realized. But despite the connection we felt, neither of us had the courage to admit our growing feelings. The timing just didn't seem right, with graduation looming and our paths about to diverge. After graduation, we went to different states for college. I headed to California to study engineering at Stanford, while Lucy went to New York to pursue a business degree at NYU. We lost touch over the years, both of us busy with our new lives and experiences. I threw myself into my studies, joined the robotics club, and even interned at a tech startup in Silicon Valley. From the occasional updates I saw on social media, Lucy seemed to be thriving too, joining the debate team, studying abroad in London, and landing impressive internships. Fast forward to 3 years ago, when our high school organized a 10-year reunion. I wasn't planning to go. I had a big project deadline at work, and the thought of making small talk with people I hadn't seen in a decade didn't appeal to me. But my mom, who still lived in our hometown, convinced me it would be good to catch up with old friends. Reluctantly, I booked a flight home. The moment I walked into the gym, decked out in our old school colors, I was hit with a wave of nostalgia. Familiar faces surrounded me, some hardly changed, others almost unrecognizable. I was chatting with my old lab partner when I saw her, Lucy. The years had been kind to her. She'd grown into a beautiful, confident woman. Her long brown hair was now styled in an elegant bob, and she carried herself with a grace I'd never noticed before. She was laughing at something someone had said, and the sound carried across the room, drawing my attention like a magnet. Before I knew what I was doing, I was walking towards her. She turned as I approached, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. Then her face broke into a wide smile, and suddenly, it was like no time had passed at all. We spent the entire evening catching up. Lucy told me about her job at a marketing firm in the city, her eyes lighting up as she described the campaigns she was working on. I shared stories about my work as a software developer, the challenges and excitement of working in Silicon Valley. We laughed about our old rivalry, marveling at how differently we saw each other now. As the night wore on, I found myself not wanting it to end. The old tension between us had transformed into something electric and exciting. When Lucy suggested we grab coffee the next day before I flew back to California, I eagerly agreed. That coffee date turned into a long walk in the park, which turned into dinner, which turned into us, missing our respective flights home. We spent the next few days rediscovering our hometown and each other. By the time we finally said goodbye at the airport, we had agreed to give a long-distance relationship a try. The next year was a whirlwind of weekend visits, long phone calls, and planning our next reunion. We'd take turns visiting each other, exploring our new cities together. I loved Lucy's adventurous spirit. She was always up for trying new restaurants or checking out obscure art galleries. She challenged me to step out of my comfort zone, and I found myself growing in ways I never expected. I remember this one weekend when Lucy visited me in San Francisco. We decided to take a spontaneous road trip down the coast to Big Sur. We got lost, our car broke down, and we ended up spending the night in a tiny motel that had definitely seen better days. But instead of complaining, Lucy turned it into an adventure. We spent the evening on the beach, watching the sunset and talking about our dreams for the future. It was during that trip that I realized I was falling in love with her. About a year into our relationship, we decided to take the plunge and move in together. We chose a city halfway between our jobs and found a cozy apartment with a view of the park. Those first few months of living together were magical. We'd cook dinner together, experimenting with new recipes and laughing at our culinary disasters. We'd stay up late binge-watching TV shows, debating plot twists and character developments. Lazy Sunday mornings were spent cuddling in bed, planning our future adventures. But as time went on, I started noticing some issues. Lucy's possessive and jealous nature, which I'd initially found endearing, began to feel suffocating. At first, it was little things. She'd get upset if I took too long to reply to her texts, or if I mentioned hanging out with female coworkers. I brushed it off, thinking it was just a phase or a sign of how much she cared. There was this incident about a year ago that should have been a red flag. I had a female colleague, Emma, who was going through a tough divorce. As a friend, I offered to lend an ear over lunch. When I mentioned this to Lucy, she flew into a jealous rage, accusing me of having feelings for Emma. It took hours to calm her down and reassure her that Emma was just a friend in need. Things came to a head about 6 months ago. I had a new project at work that involved collaborating closely with a female colleague, Sarah. Lucy became increasingly agitated whenever I mentioned Sarah's name. She'd ask probing questions about our interactions and imply that Sarah might have ulterior motives. One evening, I came home late after grabbing dinner with my team to celebrate a successful project launch. Lucy was waiting up, her face a storm of emotions. She accused me of cheating on her with Sarah despite my protests that it was just a work event. We had a huge argument that night, with Lucy demanding to see my phone and emails to prove my innocence. I was shocked by her lack of trust and tried to have a calm discussion about her jealousy. But instead of addressing the issue, Lucy surprised me by saying we should get married. She argued that if we were married, it would prove our commitment to each other and solve our trust issues. I was taken aback by the suggestion. Marriage wasn't something I had seriously considered yet, and her proposal felt more like a way to avoid dealing with a real problem. I told her that marriage wouldn't fix our issues and that we needed to work on our trust and communication first. I suggested we seek couples counseling to address the underlying problems. Lucy agreed, though her initial enthusiasm for the idea quickly waned. The counseling sessions were tough. We discussed our feelings, insecurities, and past experiences. Lucy's jealousy seemed to stem from deep-seated insecurities and a fear of losing me. It was clear that she struggled with self-esteem issues, which she had never openly discussed before. I did my best to support her, but the more we delved into these issues, the more I realized how unhappy I was in the relationship. Despite the counseling, Lucy's jealousy continued to escalate. She began checking my phone and social media accounts regularly, and she even installed tracking apps on my phone without my knowledge. One day, while going through my emails to look for some work-related information, I stumbled upon a series of messages from Sarah. They were nothing inappropriate, just professional correspondence, but Lucy had seen them too and jumped to conclusions. She confronted me with accusations of infidelity, despite my explanations that Sarah was just a colleague. The situation became unbearable. I felt like I was living under a microscope, constantly defending myself and my relationships with other people. Lucy's possessive behavior was taking a toll on my mental health, and I started to question whether this was a relationship I wanted to continue. Then things took a turn. Lucy had started spending a lot of time with a new coworker, Mark. She would talk about him constantly, often mentioning how he was such a great listener and how much they had in common. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I started noticing changes in Lucy's behavior. She was spending more time away from home, and she seemed increasingly distant. One night, while she was out with friends, I found a message on her phone from Mark that seemed overly familiar. It was clear that their relationship had crossed professional boundaries. My suspicions were confirmed when Lucy came home late one evening, and I overheard a conversation with Mark on the phone. The conversation was intimate and hinted at a romantic involvement. I confronted Lucy about it, and she admitted to having an emotional affair with Mark, though she insisted it hadn't gone beyond that. The revelation hit me hard. Lucy's betrayal was a crushing blow, and I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. She apologized profusely and begged for another chance, claiming that her actions were a result of her unresolved issues and jealousy. I was devastated but also realized that this was a turning point. I had to make a decision about our future together. I had given our relationship everything I had, trying to address the issues and make it work, but Lucy's betrayal made it clear that we needed to part ways. I decided to end the relationship. It was a painful decision, but I knew it was the right one for both of us. Lucy was devastated and pleaded with me to reconsider, but I felt that staying together would only lead to more pain and resentment. We spent the next few weeks sorting out our belongings and finalizing the breakup. It was a difficult and emotional process, but I knew it was the only way to move forward. After the breakup, I took time to focus on myself. I sought therapy to work through the pain and began rebuilding my life. I focused on my career and reconnected with friends and family. It was a slow and challenging process, but I began to heal and find joy in my life again. Lucy tried to reach out a few times after the breakup, but I needed space to move on. I hope she finds the help and support she needs to address her issues and find happiness. Looking back, I realized that while our relationship had its moments of happiness, the underlying issues were too significant to overcome. Ending the relationship was a painful but necessary step for both of us to find our own paths and move forward.